Let's see here if there's probably a better way to do that. Just make sure I don't destroy the shape before I there we go, before I go off and make a new asset. Okay, so we'll do a symmetry modifier on this guy, and this is what I was talking about. Make sure your pivot and stuff's aligned. Symmetry modifier is super, super useful. You can see here, it's really great for doing all these little corner pieces and doing all these little rotational things. Sometimes it works better than others, but especially if you need to do like a 90-degree haul or whatever, this is a really nice way to do it. So I'm just going to snap that all the way to that corner. Zooming in with all the grid lines, it's freaking out, but that's okay. Now again, our unit of measure, we try to keep it at 192. This is going to be longer than 192, but this will snap against something that is 192 for our unit of measure. And we know that if we were to drop a texture on this stuff when we UV this stuff correctly, it'll all be the same textile density, okay? So again, very important to do that, okay? Very important to make sure that if you're doing these symmetry modifiers and stuff, that at the end of the day, the textile density still works the same. And again, you don't even need to use a symmetry modifier. You can just do the grid snap here, which is what we just did. Make them unique. We can attach them. If you see me suddenly hide something and it just disappears, it's because I'm hitting the hotkey Alt-Q in 3D Studio. I'll try to use the menus as much as possible, but when I'm doing my personal work, it's all it's all hotkeys. So sometimes that stuff tends to bleed over. And right now, I'm just kind of trying to figure out the best way to do this hull section here. I'm gonna look at it. I'm trying to figure out what it's going to look like from pretty much every possible angle, so I can see if what I'm planning is going to be useful, and then see how it's going to be used later on down the road. And sometimes, like if I'm like stumbling with something and I can't visualize it, you mass it all the way through. You see how it's going to be contextually used, right? Which again is very, very useful. And again, following the simple shape rule, like, just tends to be easiest. Again, because I can see that I'm going to mirror this thing on essentially, well, it's going to be mirrored and rotated on 4 other sides. I know that this little central plane here really only needs to be snapped to, in a very basic sense, into just a basic quad, right? Like, this is going to be super simple. And again, this obviously depends on your art style and what the art direction is, what the art director's saying. But this is a really nice way to easily visualize how you go about snapping these floor pieces together. And again, it kind of makes sense when you start to see it. You're like, oh, well, obviously you should have just done this in the first place. But for me, like, I have to really kind of understand how the forms and stuff are going to work and how it's going to be utilized. So walking through this stuff is, for me at least, it's a really good thing. And we're going to do the same thing, obviously, for the top as well. And again, these are really handy because this is what you, as an environment artist, would probably end up getting. Hey, build a tileable pipe section which can wrap around the corner. This is the block out for this. You're limited to a 1024 texture, so make sure your texture scale fits in a 1024. Also, another caveat, when I'm doing this demo, I'm recording everything at twice the resolution that I would probably actually use it for the asset. So the maps and stuff are at 2048s. It'd actually probably be at 20 or 1024s. So keep that in mind as well. When you're authoring your maps in production, typically, depending on your studio, at least for me in my experience, you always go about 2 to 3 times the size of the resolution. So twice being the average. If you'd see, 2048, if that's your like your game res, you'd go to 4096 or 8K, just because the content can be scalable at that point. I've never actually seen an 8K texture ever go anywhere near a game, but you never know. And let's just look at these little pieces here. It's good just to see where they're at so I can split them out. I'm going to go in and adjust this length here, just so I can try and make it consistent. Again, you don't want to start adding in a bunch of unknown conventions and stuff into your assets, because it's not good, and it makes working for this stuff a little bit more difficult. So really, it's also about kind of where you're going to be measuring from also as well. Um, if you're not counting that centroid part, that extra part, you can leave it as is. But it's good to check that kind of stuff again. And typically, I wish I could tell you that it's definitively like, oh, you just do this. It varies on your team. It varies on your production. If you need to do a one-off piece for this or a new section, maybe section A1, that would be your tiling for that. And again, the reason why you'd have to end up doing, a one-off or a slightly longer tile section is, again, because of the length of that connection. So again, it's something that, you discuss in your production or with your team. But again, you're doing it with reason, you're doing it with purpose. You're not just doing it just for the sake of doing it. Where you can, you don't want to try and reinvent the wheel. And kind of looking back on this after it's re-recorded, I probably would have tried to just make the length work with the 192 unit, but hindsight being what it is, again, you guys can make adjustments on your end if need be. Or you can just pay for the cost of more geometry and make something unique. It's kind of up to you guys, and also how your production and your deadline as well.